Can you speak to the expense of nuclear versus solar versus oil? That's a great question. A lot of people will point out that really the only detractors to nuclear are that historically we've had issues with cost and schedule. It's the most sustainable energy source that's out there, flat out. It uses the smallest amount of materials, the smallest amount of land, it generates the smallest amount of waste. It's got a safety record that is basically the same as solar. And so if you've got something that's as safe as solar, that's far more environmentally friendly by a long shot in terms of the amounts of mining that you need, the amount of milling and manufacturing, the amount of waste that's created, the environmental damage, it's just overwhelming. And then you look at the footprint in terms of land, how much land is required for solar. A lot of people point out, they like to say, if you are anti-nuclear, you'll say, right, but with solar, it's not poisoned for good. Well, with nuclear, it's not poison for good either. But as long as you want that energy from solar, it's going to be solar panels. As soon as you no longer want that energy, the solar panels go away. So you're always committing that land to energy. And even with Fukushima, nuclear just takes an almost negligible footprint compared to wind and solar. It's just an incredibly small footprint, incredibly small impact on the environment because of that energy density. And so it is expensive. And the analogy I would like to point out with that expense is to say, if I wanted to have car safety to be much better, let's say I got sick of people dying on the freeway and I said, all right, from now on, every Dodge that you make, these are American muscle cars. If you're going to make an American muscle car, it has to be hyper safe. You have to be able to roll down a cliff. You have to be in a tunnel fire. You have to be able to submerge yourself in a lake. You have to be able to fall on a big boulder with a pointy spike on it. And from all of that, everybody that's in that car has to walk away safe. Not a scratch on them. Now, if I made a law that said that cars have to do that, I could make an American muscle car like that, but it's going to be crazy expensive. It's going to be really hard to build. And if I quit doing it for a long time, or if I did the first one, then the schedule was probably going to be highly suspect that you're going to be able to do that on schedule, because that's an incredible criteria. But that's where we are with nuclear, is that you have a meltdown at a nuclear reactor like 3 Mile Island and nobody gets hurt. How is it that the worst possible industrial accident that you could have at a Western reactor like 3 Mile Island or Fukushima is that nobody in the public gets hurt? The only deaths from Fukushima were a panicked evacuation. World Health Organization, the United Nations, their expert panel, all the review papers, they all pointed out that the radioactivity released from Fukushima was insufficient to produce any expected measurable medical effects in the Japanese public ever. And this is something that's been studied. Radiation effects have been studied since the atomic bomb survivors and before. We know what it does. And we know that the dose was not sufficient to do that kind of thing to the public. The point is that when the worst thing that can possibly happen is that nobody dies, how is that a bad thing? And yet people use that to argue that nuclear is bad because Fukushima happened and because 3 Mile Island happened. Chernobyl, that's like, in my opinion, comparing Chernobyl to modern nuclear is like comparing the Hindenburg to modern air travel. It just doesn't make sense. They're completely different technologies. One is really bad, but modern air flight is far better. And if you wanted to say, well, air flight has to be perfect, you can't have any accidents to do flying, then flying goes away. But where the equity issue comes in is when you only pick one technology and say that's the one that has to be super duper safe, and it can't hurt anybody no matter what happens. But the others, they can go and kill people. You can go and kill people with Japanese cars or other American cars, whatever. But this one design, this one particular way of transportation, that has to be ultra safe. That's going to make that one design incredibly expensive and very difficult to build, which is where we're at with nuclear, because the law requires, well, if I'm going to get a license to build a nuclear reactor, the worst thing that's allowed to happen is that nobody gets hurt. Think about it. That's a cost comparison for you. So hope everybody learned something. Hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye.